Hello, my pack, my tribe. Welcome to Howling After Dark. So, we're going to take a little departure from our usual. We're not going to talk about the paranormal tonight. Instead, I have a very specific topic in mind. These are amazing stories that I'm about to tell you. They are stories of survival. They are stories of survival at sea. Now, why is that a fascinating subject, you might say? Well, I'm going to tell you. As rare as it is for somebody to survive, say, deep in the forest somewhere, or in the middle of a desert, it's even more remarkable when they survive at sea. Because the sea has about a gazillion different ways to kill you. First off, there's drowning. If that doesn't get you, animals in the water might. And if that doesn't get you, starvation and dehydration will. There's very, very few stories where somebody has been missing for an extended period of time at sea and they've shown up alive. But we're about to cover some of them. So, let me get to it. So, our first story happens in June of 1965. 6 teenagers, boys from the island of Tonga, grew weary, sick and tired of their daily life in a Catholic boarding school, which, from what I understand, I don't think I can blame them, and decide that, because it's boarding schools on the island of Tonga, the only way to really get away is to get off of Tonga. So they steal a 24-foot boat and set out for sea, and everything was going smoothly. So they anchored for the night about 6 miles off the island to the north, and then a storm came in, and the storm was incredible, and it actually snapped their anchor chain, and the furious winds destroyed their rudder and mast, and they were set adrift at sea in a storm. And then, when the storm had passed, they were miraculously all still alive, but they were hopelessly lost. They didn't have any navigational equipment on board. This is just a simple boat. And so they didn't have a compass, they didn't have even a sextant, which, if you don't know what a sextant is, Google it. I'm not going to explain it to you, it's too complicated. But they were all still alive, and over the course of 8 days, they drifted, let me see here exactly, because this story has it in kilometers, but I'm not interested in kilometers, so give me a second. They were about 200 miles away. Hold on, I gotta wait for this stupid freaking thing to load again. I get all my information, by the way, online. That's the most accurate, but in these cases they are. And the reason that I know that they are is because these stories have already been covered by other people. I'm just redoing it. But this thing will ever freaking load. So basically, they find themselves at sea almost 200 miles away from where they started. It's been 8 days. They're running out of food and water when they see this island. And they make the decision, since they can't steer their boat, that they're going to abandon the boat and swim for shore. Now, if this page will ever frickin' load, I can tell you how far away they were when they abandoned the boat. It was a pretty good distance. It was, I think they said like 32 kilometers, or 30 some odd kilometers away from the island. So you're talking roughly about 10 miles or so away from the island. But they start swimming for the island, and miraculously they all make it. And so they're on the island, and they're putting together very rough shelter, and they're hunting for food, and mostly what they're finding is like small game birds and fish, and they don't have the means to make a fire, so they're eating a lot of stuff raw. And they start exploring the island, and miraculously they find the remains of this old village on this island up near this volcano. And it's got things there that they can use. It's got like food and water and like a well, or not a well. They have like hollowed out tree trunks that they can catch rainwater in, and all this stuff, and it helps them survive. And God damn it, why won't this thing load? Load. I hate this thing. Hold on a sec. Anyways, I think like a month or two goes by. I can't tell you because this fucking page won't load. But they see a passing ship, passing boat, and one of the boys swims out to it, and they're rescued. Come on, you stupid thing. Would you frickin' load, please? Jesus Christ. Hold on. Thank you. For 3 months, they were desperate for food and water, but everything changed when they embarked on a 2-day climb to the island's volcanic crater. Here they discovered the ruins of a village ruins of a village from the 1800s and harnessed its resources. They found feral chickens and wild taro, which is a plant, and bananas, and they captured rainwater and hauled out tree trunks. Soon they began creating their own thriving community. The two eldest boys became their leaders, one as a spiritual leader and the other as a practical leader. From there they divided up into pairs and worked garden, kitchen, and guard duty. Other than a failed attempt to leave on a makeshift raft, this was their life on the island. Then ironically, the 11th of September 1966, an Australian fisherman who was passing by the island noticed patches of burned grass on the cliffs. Peering through his binoculars, he saw the naked and disheveled boys running around. He heard that serious criminals were often marooned on remote islands, so he cautiously motored the fishing vessel closer to the island. That's when one of the boys swam to him and explained the situation in English. After verifying their stories, he ended up rescuing the boys, who had been marooned for over a year and were presumed dead. When they made it back to Tonga, the boys were all deemed healthy and many huge feasts were held in celebration of their miraculous survival. Next is this story. I first heard this story on Mr. Ballin's podcast, and this was a hard one. The survivor in question, his name is Jose Salvador Alvarenga, and on the 17th of November 2012, two fishermen motored out of the village of Costa Azul. Now, let me back up a little bit. So, what happened was, Jose and his partners had a fairly successful fishing run, but Jose wasn't done. He wanted to go back out one more time, but none of his partners wanted to go out with him. He's looking around the docks for somebody to go with him, and the only person he could find was this young, let's see, I'm trying to find his name, 23-year-old guy named Ezekiel, who didn't have a lot of sea experience, and so Jose had to, basically resolve himself to the fact that, Ezekiel probably isn't going to be doing much of the work, but that was fine with him. He really just, Ezekiel Cordova was his name, and they were in a 23-foot fiberglass skiff with a single outboard motor and a refrigerator-sized icebox for storing fish. Not long after they left, they had incredible success. Fishing caught nearly 400 pounds of fish, but that success was short-lived. Dark clouds rolled in, and a storm bore down upon them. In the raging waters, they were forced to dump all of their catch, which they spent all day getting, to make their boat more maneuverable. Jose managed to call his boss on their two-way radio before the battery died, but the storm had blown them so far off course that the search party couldn't find them. After 5 days, the storms finally passed, but it damaged their motor, their fishing gear, and most of their portable electronics, including their locator. They had a locator beacon and their radios. So they had no means of communicating with the rest of the world. To make matters worse, they didn't have any oars, sails, or running lights. They didn't even have an anchor. They only had a handful of basic supplies and food. They were at the mercy of the sea. Jose was a seasoned sailor and as a result was very resourceful. Using his bare hands, he caught fish, turtles, jellyfish, and seabirds for them to eat, although they had no means of cooking, so they had to eat everything raw. He salvaged plastic from the water and collected rainwater to drink. Unfortunately, more often than not, they had to drink turtle blood or their own urine to stay hydrated. All of this was understandably difficult for Ezekiel, a 23-year-old who had little experience at sea. After 4 months, he became sick of eating raw food and refused to eat anymore. He eventually died of starvation, but before he did, he made Jose promise not to eat his corpse. Jose honored his promise and did not touch Ezekiel's body. For nearly a week, he contemplated ending his life, but due to his Christian faith, he decided against it. However, he did start speaking to Ezekiel's corpse and became worried he was going insane, so after 6 days, he threw the body overboard. Months passed. Jose had no way of telling the date or time, so instead he counted the phases of the moon to keep track of time. By the 15th lunar cycle, he spotted land. This was Ebon Atoll in Marshall Islands. Eventually he made it to shore where he was discovered by 2 locals. It was the 30th of January 2014, 438 days after he and Ezekiel were lost at sea. He's the first person in recorded history to survive for over a year in a small boat at sea. His journey from Mexico to the Marshall Islands was over 5,000 miles. Now, this one, I also heard on Mr. Ballin, and when I watched it, because if you see this episode of his videos on YouTube, this is the guy that was under the ocean, like he was in a boat in an air pocket under the ocean and survived. And this is his story. Early in the morning on the 26th of May, 2013, the Gascon 4, a tugboat operated by West African Ventures, was stabilized in an oil tanker 36 kilometers off the coast of Nigeria. Again with the kilometers. That's hold on. That's about 22 miles. A little over 22 miles. Again. Alright, so about 22 miles off the coast of Nigeria in the heavy seas. The tugboat's cook, Harrison Okene, woke up and shuffled out of bed to go to the bathroom. Suddenly he was thrust off the toilet when a huge wave struck the vessel and capsized it. As the boat filled with water, he had little time to react, but miraculously an air pocket formed nearby, so he took refuge in it. When the boat finally settled on the seafloor, Harrison was basically in a horror movie. Inside the sunken ship, he was alone and freezing in the cold, dark water. He would attempt to leave the air pocket to escape, but there was nowhere else for him to go. Worse yet, all 11 of his crewmates had drowned, and he heard fish, possibly sharks, eating their bodies. In this hopeless hellscape, he could only pray to God for deliverance. At one point, he actually swum into the captain's quarters, which was across the hallway from him, risking running into these sharks or whatever it was in the water that was eating his crewmates. And because he was basically without food and water, and so he knew that the captain kept some stuff in his quarters, so he went into the quarters and found like crackers and candy and like a soda bottle, and grabbed those and then swum back to the air pocket. And the whole time, keep in mind, he doesn't have a flashlight. So he's in complete darkness. He can't see anything. He can only hear the sounds of whatever is eating his crew. 3 days he survived like this. For 3 days he lived in this absolute hellscape of surviving in this air pocket, and he just knows that at any time this air pocket is going to collapse and then he's done. But miraculously, 3 days later, he sees lights in the water. 3 South African divers had come to investigate the wreck and recover the bodies. They were shocked when they discovered Harrison alive and immediately arranged for his rescue. They fitted him with a diving helmet and transferred him to a closed diving bell that took him to the surface. Reason for this, just to briefly explain, diving bells are something that they use when divers have to go extremely deep. And the reason being is because without a diving bell, you have to make these regular pressure stops so that the pressure is equalized, because otherwise you could get nitrogen narcosis and what they call the bends, which is like pressure sickness. It's basically like if you get the bends, like your veins could actually rupture. It's not a pretty way to go. I'll just say that. So they put him in this dive bell, and what a dive bell does is it equalizes the pressure. So you're inside the dive bell. The inside of the dive bell is at the same pressure as the level of the sea that you're at. And since he's on the floor, it's a lot of pressure, right? And then they slowly decrease it over time until you can come out of the bell, and then you're fine. Because he'd been underwater for days, he was at risk of decompression sickness, the bends, so he needed to be slowly readjusted to the surface. In other words, the surface pressure, so that, basically what I just said. To do this, he had to stay inside the diving bell for another 3 days while a life support technician watched over him, but after that he was able to return to life as normal. Despite his traumatic experience, he did not let fear overtake him. Today, he has returned to the sea as a commercial diver, just like the divers who rescued him in 2013. That is fucking incredible. Let me break this down for you. This guy basically survived the most horrific thing that a human being can go through. Alone, in the dark, at the bottom of the ocean, with very dangerous animals on board the ship, eating your crewmates. You can't see anything. You can only hear the sounds of your crew being eaten. For days. For 3 days. And he still went back to the sea. That's freaking amazing. And Harrison, I don't know you, you don't know me, but I gotta tell you something, sir. You're a hero. You may not know that about yourself, but you're a hero. And if you ever want to be interviewed about any of this or about any of your new adventures, contact me. Contact me. Letter J, Pettit, P-E-T-E-T 1969 at gmail.com. Anytime. I would love to have you on the show. Alright, moving on. Let's see. This one I really like because it's historical, but it's also the person involved in the story. Violet Jessup was a typical 20-something working as a stewardess aboard luxury ships in the early 1900s. One day, while working aboard the RMS Olympic, her ship collided with a British warship named the HMS Hawk. There were no casualties, but it was not a good start to her career. It only got worse from there. Her next ship was the Olympic sister ship, the Titanic. You already know what happened there. I don't need to go over it. But did you know that not only did Violet survive the infamous sinking of the Titanic, but she also rescued a baby on board the ship? She was ordered into Lifeboat 16, and a ship's officer then handed her a baby. When the Carpathia rescued the Titanic survivors, a woman on board grabbed the baby and ran off crying. After her workplace sank to the bottom of the Atlantic, she got a job as a stewardess for the British Red Cross on the HMHS Britannic, a floating hospital and the sister ship to both the Olympic and the Titanic. Surely, after surviving the sinking of the Titanic, nothing could be worse, right? Yeah, not so much. While cruising through the Aegean Sea off of Greece on the 21st of November 1916, the Britannic struck a naval mine and sank in 55 minutes. Violet managed to make it into a lifeboat, but quickly had to abandon it when the lifeboat collided with the ship's spinning propellers. And remarkably, 2 other Titanic survivors, Arthur John Priest and Archie Gill, were also aboard the Britannic and managed to survive the sinking as well. You'd think after these incidents, Violet would have sworn off going back to sea, but she went right back out in 1920. She continued working on ships and even went on 2 cruises around the world on the SS Bugenland in 1950. She retired and lived a normal life in England. So just to be clear, that's 3 historic shipwrecks that she survived. 3 of them. 2 of them in freaking close relation to each other. Because, look, first was the RMS Olympic, which for the time was a huge news item. Like, it was worldwide. Everybody was talking about the sinking of the Olympic. Right? She survives that one. Then survives the Titanic, the most profound and largest shipwreck in history. Survives that. And then, just a little while later, survives the Britannic. Just to be clear about this, I heard about the Britannic sinking before I heard about the Titanic. That should tell you what a big deal the Britannic was. Now, there's a lot of people nowadays who don't even know what it is because they haven't made a movie about it with Leonardo DiCaprio. But maybe they should. Alright, this one is interesting. So, while Violet Jessup was working aboard ill-fated luxury liners, adventurers from around the world were scrambling to explore Antarctica in 1914. British explorers Sir Ernest Shackleton and 27 other men departed South Georgia Island and sailed for Antarctica in an attempt to trek across the frozen continent by land. However, their ship, the Endurance, became trapped in ice before they even made it ashore, and they drifted on pack ice in the Weddell Sea for nearly a year. Eventually, on the 27th of October 1915, the Endurance was crushed by the sea ice and soon after sank to a depth of over 3,000 meters. I'm guessing that's a little over 1,000 feet. Now focused solely on survival in sub-zero temperatures, the men attempted to march across the ice to a handful of islands that may have food stores. Unfortunately, those islands were all over 300 miles away, and the men only were averaging about 7 miles a day travel time. Shackleton saw the writing on the wall and said it would take us over 300 days to reach the land, and called the march to a halt. They then set up camp on the ice and named it Patience Camp. For over 3 months they remained at Patience Camp, but by April 19th, on the 30th of August 1916, nearly 2 years after the expedition began, they reached Elephant Island and rescued the remaining men. Despite their hardships, all 28 men survived the failed expedition. Shackleton credited their unbelievable survival to divine providence. He and the 2 other men even reported seeing a 4th person guiding them on their difficult hike to the whaling station. What's crazy is that on the opposite side of the of Antarctica, the Aurora, the ship that was supposed to assist and pick up Shackleton and his men, also became trapped in the ice. And floated out to sea. In this case, the short party known as the Ross Sea Party was stuck on Antarctica for 8 months before the Aurora, with Shackleton aboard, was able to return to rescue them. That's some amazing stuff. Like, I don't think people really truly appreciate what that means. So you're in the Antarctic, first of all. let me clear up some myths about the Antarctic. It doesn't contain Santa's village. There's nowhere on the island where you're going to walk in a door and get warm milk and cookies. It is desolate. It is the definition of desolate. There's literally nothing there. There's outposts from different countries and stuff there where maybe you might find some kind of aid if you can reach them or even know where they are. But this is way back when most of these outposts weren't even built yet. So they're basically all alone. Right, this whaling station was probably the closest thing nearby, and it's only luck that they found it, because so much of that terrain looks like so much of that terrain. It is incredibly easy to get lost or stray off course. Because it all looks the same. There's no land features on this fucking chunk of ice. You don't have trees. You can't look at that tree and say, oh, well, that's a distinctive looking tree, because there is no fucking tree. There's nothing. There's literally nothing. So the only way that you can navigate on Antarctica, especially at that time, way before they had GPS, was compass and map. And if you strayed off course, you could completely miss the thing that you're looking for. Because you're also dealing with the weather, which is harsh winds. And I don't know if you've been in extreme cold, but let me tell you something. When the air is that cold, your eyes tear up, which means that your visibility drops, which means that you can't see very far. Right? Plus you're in danger of what's called snow blindness, which is caused when the rays from the sun reflect off of crystals in the ice back into your face. Right? And then you're talking about a area of land whose average temperature, this is average year-round temperature, is 16 degrees below zero. So you're freezing. People get hypothermic in that weather in a matter of minutes. And they're trekking this huge ass distance across the ice to get to this whaling station. And somehow they make it. The chances of them surviving that, much less actually getting to their destination, in which case was this whaling station, is a miracle all unto itself. The fact that they get to the whaling station, they find help, they get back to where they basically abandoned the boat to pick up the rest of the men, and they all survived. Like, in nowadays terms, every single one of those guys would have to buy the lottery. They would have to buy lottery tickets because they're the luckiest sons of bitches alive. The fact that all of them survived. All of them. This is an environment that could kill anybody. It doesn't care how tough you are. It does not care how prepared you are. Things happen all the time. It is got like a million different ways to kill you. And they all survived. They didn't lose one guy. That's a miracle unto itself. And then you combine all those things together. This is one of the most miraculous survival stories at sea in history. Alright, I'm about out of time before I sign off. I just want to announce really quick that Monday night, 9 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, I will be debuting my newest show, Killer Voices. Killer Voices is true crime stories as told from the perspective of the killer. That's right, you heard me. From the killer. Which means I'm going to be talking in the first person a lot, as if I'm, I don't know, BTK or the Son of Sam or whoever. And I'm going to attempt on each episode to get into their mind and maybe find new truths that have gone missed by law enforcement, by news reporters, by society at large, with some of the most famous cases in American history. And I'm going to start with the granddaddy of them all, Elizabeth Short. That's right. The first episode is called Time Was Short. It is all about the Black Dahlia, and I think it will blow your minds because the perspective I'm coming from is, I think, not something that was ever considered. So tune into that Monday night, 9 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. That's 11 p.m. Eastern, by the way. 8 Pacific, I think. Tune into that because you're not going to want to miss this. Trust me. There has not been a podcast like this ever. So, there you go. Until next time, my pack, my tribe. Peace out.